Welcome back, all you kings, queens, and in-betweens, to another video here on the channel. This is going to be something new, and though it's new, it is actually the concept that led to the name of this channel, This Week in Weeb. I originally kind of envisioned this as like a podcast kind of thing, and I am finally hoping to make that a reality, the This Week in Weeb podcast. Hopefully all of you all listening know who I am. I am Jeremy, and I am normally the one making most of the content here on the channel, but I am joined by a good friend of mine, and that is Miguel. Do you want to introduce yourself, Miguel?
Hello, thank you for having me, Jeremy. Yes, so my name is Miguel. Jeremy, I've known you now, how long? About
3 years? 4 years?
Has it been? Yeah, about 3 years. Met Jeremy through the wonderful world of D&D that I've been pushed or heavily suggested to go into, which I've been enjoying. And Jeremy, you know, you've been making all this great content, so I figured I'd do what I can to see if I can help out.
My big thing with this is I wanted to have a nice discussion with a friend over some interesting anime-related, Weeb-related, and Weeb-adjacent things. And I was going to try and make this a fairly regular thing. So this being the inaugural episode, I figure we would talk about our relation to Weeb as a concept. Like, what are the things that make us interested in these things? Like, what's our history with it? And I'm going to throw it to you first.
So I guess to kind of break that part down first, and this was definitely my original reluctance to kind of get into this, is what exactly would you define as Weeb? What does Weeb mean to you?
So I think Weeb is anime related things, but now that anime and a lot of geek culture stuff has become mainstream, I feel like they blend a lot more than they used to.
Okay. So for me, Weeb always meant just kind of like Japanese culture specifically. Like, do you remember that really old, and this is probably dating myself as well, there was a video to kind of promote, I think it was Otakon or one of the, anime conventions back in the day, and they had said, if you're into like anime or everything else, and one guy says Garugamesh, just because it's one of the Japanese things that they had. And I feel like that's like a good microcosm of like Weeb culture. I mean, like all things Japanese, including anime. If you're a fan of Pocky, if you're a fan of Hello Kitty, it's definitely going to be one of those things where there are people in this community, in this culture, that are happy to kind of share that with you. So for me personally, I have not been deeply into the Weeb world in a very long time. I definitely dip my toe every now and then. There's certain anime that I do catch and I watch and just don't appreciate the culture, but I've been looking to get back. So I think this is gonna be a good exercise for me too, to kind of get back into it.
And I would love to help bring you back into that by giving you homework of things to watch.
I am always down for that. I mean, you've already given me some, and some I enjoyed a great deal. I'm very excited to see how it turns out, and some of it I'm gonna look at you a little differently now, Jeremy.
Yeah. Listen, there's a lot of bad stuff that comes out every season.
There's a lot of bad stuff that comes out.
I will say that my history with anime is, I remember back when I was first getting into it, when it was on American television, things like Sailor Moon and DBZ, coming home every day from school and watching DBZ at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Cartoon Network. Back when I was watching Saturday morning cartoons and watching things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And all of the live action stuff like Beetleborgs. I don't know if you ever watched Beetleborgs.
Yes, I remember they had the weird Elvis ghost for some reason.
Yeah, all that stuff was the stuff that was added in, but the other stuff came from Japan. It was just like with Power Rangers, where Power Rangers was Super Sentai in Japan, and then they added all the American stuff when it was here. So I remember all that from when I was a kid, and my first foray into watching anime online that wasn't currently airing in America was actually Inuyasha.
Okay.
Yeah, because Inuyasha had a airing on Cartoon Network in the early 2000s, I want to say, but I was really interested in it, so I went and found all the online sites where I could watch it online and not have to wait for it to come here.
Now, since you watched it online, I'm guessing these probably weren't the most legit legal sites back in the day.
No, this was like Kazaa and torrents and stuff like that, where I could download them.
Like European subtitles for some reason. Like, yeah, sure, that says VidX in the bottom corner.
Yeah, having to deal with all of those subtitles that were like huge blocky Times New Roman letters and things like that. Not now. I mean, there wasn't streaming services, so if you were trying to watch anime as an American person in America, then
you had to earn it.
Yeah, you had to go hunting for it. Absolutely. There was an initiation to it, or you had to wait until 1 a.m. when they showed the episode of Cowboy Bebop you wanted to watch.
So I think that's kind of like it's funny that you mentioned that, because when you think of weeb culture, definitely I think the anime is gonna be the biggest one, and I think everybody has some connection to anime. We're talking about it in terms of Japanese animation. Even when I got to this country, one of the first things I ever watched was Transformers, and I thought, oh my god, Transformers toys are great. That's all Japanese. It comes from different Japanese shows. They had different toy lines that they want to incorporate and everything else, and then boom, Americanize it to Transformers. They had people who were not necessarily quote unquote bad guys, like, well, he looks bad enough. And now you realize so many things from your youth were either started, created, or just simply made in Japan. One of my favorite shows growing up was definitely Thundercats, and I always wondered why the opening looks so good compared to the actual episode sometimes, and it's because the opening and some scenes during the show were all drawn by Japanese and Korean artists back in the day. They just shipped it over and had it there, and it's one of those things where you just realize how prevalent it was in our own youth. And then when you kind of start to look for, like, a hunt for it now, you realize it's not as readily available. My first definitely kind of big foray into anime has probably the same thing, Toonami, looking at certain things on when they showed Power Rangers, everything like that. But then to actually get to the point where you want to look for more and seek it out, you have to hunt like these certain hobby stores that just quote unquote say hobby store, but then you realize they sell Gundam kits, or, which I'm sure we can get into another day,
back in the day, bootleg DVDs,
the bootleg DVDs, exactly.
Or bootleg VHS,
bootleg everything, which we will, touch upon at some point. But in Manhattan now, obviously much older, still that need for like anime and Japanese merch and everything else is very, very high, but it's not the way it is now. Amazon did not stock all these things regularly. Certain stores did not exist to American clientele as much. So you had to seek it out, and you would get the bootlegs, whatever's available.
Yeah. And, back in the day, as a kid and even into my teenage years, I didn't realize just how much they bastardized anime. And taking different things, like, what was it, Robotech? I think it was like 3 different series shoved together. And is like, when you finally start looking into this, I was like, oh, there's like 100 more episodes of this. Or Cardcaptor Sakura, they completely cut out any of the things that they didn't think Americans would want to watch on this and made it a completely different show.
I mean, you have definitely like the very famous 4Kids era of things where they're just like editing stuff for American audiences and
Jelly Donuts.
Exactly. Just bastardizing. But there are things where they also kind of just cut stuff out because they thought people either wouldn't care, wouldn't know, wouldn't realize. And one of the things for me was, another huge show for me was watching Voltron growing up. And I always remember the beginning scene when they're doing the whole like intro to the characters. There is a pilot, one of the lines, who's male presenting, but he's wearing black colors. I'm like, but there was no black pilot. And I'm like, who is this guy? And it wasn't until many, 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 many years later that, at least for the Americanized version, there was a pilot named Sven, who I think in Japanese was Shiro, who he got hurt and then he couldn't be, kind of like pseudo wrote him off. I forget the exact details, but at the end of the episode, he comes back, saves the day, dies. But in the American version, oh, he's just sleeping. He's in a coma. That's it. And I was like, so I wasn't crazy. That guy didn't belong, but he was there.
I wonder if that's what they're referencing in the whole Black Falcon thing on Key and Peele. You ever seen that skit when they're in the Falcons and they're all wearing the different colors, and one of them's Black Falcon, and they keep calling it, well, he's Green Falcon, but they keep calling him Black Falcon.
You're like in modern, when they did a Falcon and then Captain America Winter Soldier, and Winter Soldier is Black Falcon, it's just Falcon.
It's just Falcon. It's just not Black Falcon.
Oh, man, but I'm happy, and we can hopefully discuss this more one day, how they revised and revitalized Voltron with the new series, with the new animation, everything else, and just finally gave Shiro his due. No more Sven.
I haven't watched the new Voltron, but I have seen that it's become a kind of Gen Z touchstone. It's like one of those ones that's along the lines of like She-Ra and Steven Universe, and it's like in that area where a lot of them talk about it. It's brought up in a lot of issues and things like that.
Voltron, I mean, as someone who is a huge ally to the LGBT plus community, but not LGBT plus specifically myself, I learned that it became such a big cornerstone for people, but also exactly became a huge issue because there are people who felt that it was doing what many shows do, which is kind of erasing kind of certain LGBTQ plus characters, while they still kind of brought them in and presented them. So it's like, hey, they're doing something, but is it enough? But exactly, it became one of those shows who within the community itself are huge. If you go to Redbubble and you put in Voltron Legend Defender, there's so many stickers with LGBTQ plus things on them, and they're great. But when I just want a regular sticker, I got to go through so many pages to kind of find one that doesn't have specifically
a flag on
an orientation, which I'm like, these are awesome for people who definitely need this and want this and need that representation, because it's important to have the representation, but I just want a line. Can I just get a line, please?
Just give me a picture of the pilots with a quote under it. That's all I want.
Yeah. Oh, man. But, you know, I think that's another thing where I think anime as a whole has always been leaps and bounds ahead of American culture, American standards, and American kind of censorship, openly having characters who are LGBT plus, who are transgender, who are all different things, and saying that's just the way it is. And they kind of move on.
We were talking about the other day off recording, talking about Sailor Moon and the kind of things that they did in Sailor Moon. You want to go into that?
So my wife is a huge Sailor Moon person. That's her, you know, bread and butter, her expertise. And when we started kind of dating, she said to me that she wanted me to watch all of Sailor Moon, the original series. And I had seen bits and pieces, again, from what they showed, like on Toonami or here and there passing on WB, early morning kind of thing. But I never really paid attention because I wasn't, I guess, the main demographic, and it just didn't appeal to me as much as...
I just watched it at like 6 a.m. before school. And
exactly.
On 11 or whatever. I was like, I'm half asleep. I'm not getting any of the deeper meaning.
So I would watch it, and it was fun. It's anime, which is, again, if nothing else, aesthetically, it's gorgeous. But as we watched it, there's so many more things, and I was like, wait, this was part of the show? And one of the big things was the fact that they have the Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus, who on the American version were presented as cousins.
Yeah.
And they're just really good cousins.
My roommate.
And then you find out later on through like pop culture osmosis, and in my case from my wife, that no, they were together. These were two female presenting characters who were very much in love, and they're destined to be in love, and they acknowledge their love, they're aware of their love, and they just say it is what it is. We're accepting it, we move on. It's not something to make into some kind of taboo subject and something to shy away from. It is what it is, and we continue forward.
Looking back on it now as an adult and with the world experience that we have with anime and stuff, it's not really all that well hidden.
No, it's not. It's
but as a kid, you're like, oh, well, they said they're cousins.
Exactly. You see through that scope, that's what you think. But when you, exactly, as an adult, I mean, one of the current shows, while
I never looked at my cousin like that.
Oh, I didn't. That's a whole different genre, which I really hope you don't make me watch. But
I'm just gonna give you names, and you won't know ahead of time.
But even like certain like American shows nowadays, exactly, Steven, you were saying they're much more direct with it, which I think if you're a younger person, a child, it may not stand out to you, but as you get older, like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense. You know, that stands for something else. Like, oh, okay, fine. But I think it's very different between now, like you'll get it when you get it, as opposed to before certain anime shows, they wouldn't want that to exist at all. Like if they said
it was erasure, it was actual erasure.
Exactly. Like this is no, they're not together, they're not lovers, they're cousins. So yeah, so Sailor Moon, I think it's one of those things where they had it and it was part of it, and that was it. No one questioned it, no one had an issue with it, and that would have been fine. I don't think it would have ruined, in my opinion, I don't think it would have ruined any childhoods. I don't think it would have made anything worse. It actually would have made a lot of things better to have two characters who are quote unquote good guys helping out the protagonist, and oh yeah, by the way, my partner is the same gender as I am. That's perfectly fine.
It was just a thing. You didn't have to dwell on it or anything like that. It's just part of the plot, and you don't have to kind of always make it a big thing. It doesn't have to be the central point of the character, which is I look at that kind of stuff on things like CW shows. I feel like a lot of CW shows are like, that is, you are that. That's it. That's your character.
Yeah, that's. I guess this is. Maybe a point to bring somebody else on who might be better suited to this than myself or you, but I think you're right. I think it comes down to the fact that there is a certain amount of pandering and a certain amount of like, well, we're going to include this person to be the quote unquote gay character, and that fills our quota. I'm like, well, that's
tokenism.
Exactly. That's not representation. That's you just ensuring that you're appealing to your quote unquote demographic.
I feel like anime has always done a good job with that kind of inclusion. Like we were talking about, like I see a lot of stuff that is like, I've been getting a lot into Yuri manga lately and Yuri anime, and it's never a thing where I don't want to say that. It is sometimes a point where they're like, can I feel this way for another girl? Mm-hmm. Something like that. But it's not addressed in a point where it's thrown in your face to the degree. It's used as a way to examine the character's feelings. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at it as ways like, this is what society is saying. This is what I've always been taught. This is what my parents think. Can I move past this? And that's part of the character experience. And I think it's handled so well in those kind of things. And then I look at how American television tries to handle it, and it's just not done very well.
I feel like the reason why it might not be done as well is because the experience is potentially different here in some ways in like American culture, where we're supposed to be so open-minded, but we're still very much not. So much of the country is just horribly closed off to so many things.
Virtue signaling.
Exactly. So it's like you put up something like, okay, yeah, it's good, but then it's not that easy. And until people collectively start to like be more open-minded, be more accepting, be more inclusive, sincerely and genuinely, it's always going to be hard for someone to, I would imagine, to come out, to be open, to share their truth with others. What you kind of just mentioned, there's an anime that my wife, I'm not gonna say she made me watch it because I enjoyed it. I can't deny that at all. Called Love Stage. And I hope maybe one day you'll watch it because it's surprisingly very, very funny and cute. The short version is there is a very famous actor guy, and many, many years ago when he was a kid, he did like this commercial thing or whatever. And the commercial thing, they had the parents were also famous actors, and they had what at the time was believed to be their daughter. And she played like the little kids' love interest. Like it's cute little kids falling in love and whatever, fine. The actor guy fell in love with what he thought was the female actress and has loved her his entire life. So now they're doing this kind of big reunion and revival of that commercial. He's like, I get to see her again, fine. What he didn't know was that the actress was actually a little boy that they made step in because he has soft feminine features. So put a wig on him and everything else. And basically he's been in love with a little boy his whole life. Now fast forward, little
comes in with like a beard and like a flannel shirt.
They're doing the whole thing, and they don't want to tell the actor guy that it was not a female or a young girl before. So they ask the now older young man, can you just be the girl one last time? And he's like, oh, fine, because his whole family's involved in like the entertainment culture, and he's definitely not, but fine, he'll do it. So he gets in. And when he's all dressed up, he's very pretty. He has soft features. The actor guy sees him, falls in love all over again.
Still doesn't know it's a guy?
Doesn't know it's a guy. Kisses him the whole night. And the guy who's presenting as a female, I forget their names. I know it sounds confusing. He runs off because he's kissed a guy. And he's like, what do I do? Or anything else? Fine. There's definitely an undertone throughout the whole thing. And I don't want to spoil it too much about exactly what you said. Coming to terms of like, what does it mean for me to like someone of my same gender? What does that mean? But it's overshadowed by the fact that people are experiencing love. And it's like, I'm more freaked out and scared by the fact that I'm falling in love with someone regardless of their gender, as a separate note being, oh, and they happen to be my same gender, which just makes things more complicated. But that's not like I said, that's not the main focal point. The focal point is I'm falling in love with someone that I've only known recently. This person who's loved me for so many years, who never really knew me. And by the way, we were both guys. And it's such a cute anime. It's a ridiculous anime, but it's very, very cute. It's very, very silly. And then the actor guy, I think one of the big things for him is that he at first is what you expect of most kind of alpha guys, which is, it's like, I feel lied to, I feel tricked, and da 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 da. But then he realizes,
this is the main character?
Him and I think the actor guy, I guess, would share main character status, but he at some point he just kind of accepts it. He's like, whether it's a guy or a girl, I love this person. I'm in love with this person. So what are you gonna do? And the taboo, quote unquote, bad aspect of it being two same gender person is kind of just pushed to the side. And now he's like, what do I do? I'm falling in love with this person. And that becomes like the greater scope of it. The lighthearted part is that, oh, by the way, he was dressed as a girl, but it's like I said, it's such a cute anime. It's a very fun anime. There's a live version of it. I don't think it was Japanese made. I feel like from the accent of how they were speaking, it sounds like it was another country that wasn't specifically Japan. Because like, you and I have heard Japanese enough where we can pick it out. We can pick it out, exactly. Like Japanese sounds very different to Korean to me. Sounds very different to Chinese to me. This didn't sound Japanese, but again, it was also a little while ago, so I might have just been mistaken.
I tried to type in Love Stage live action, and it just brought up I like the art style.
The art style is what...
It's very colorful.
In my imagination, the art style is what I equate with like yaoi. Just like kind of big heads, big eyes, sharp chins, long fingers. It has that yaoi feel to it.
Just pretty men.
It's just pretty men. And
I was not picturing that this is what this character looked like in my head while you were describing it.
oh man, you got to watch it. We'll make it a point to watch it. This will be what I bring to you.
Christopher Sabat voices Biscuit, whoever Biscuit is. Christopher Sabat is
Vegeta.
Krillin.
Oh
no, you're right, Vegeta.
yeah. Vegeta.
I'm pretty sure it's Vegeta.
Oh, we got fact check.
I got a fact check. Yeah, it is Vegeta.
Okay.
Vegeta, Piccolo.
Because I got his autograph
Yamcha.
one, so I hope I got the right one.
Listen, they're always together
They
at
always
the events.
are, yeah.
I can't remember them all, but he's a nice guy. Saw a couple of panels with him. But I think that we kind of went off on a whole discussion there, but I think that really kind of embodies what we like about anime is the way that it tackles issues in the way that we don't get from other media. I think American animated media is just starting to get there. It just started to get there in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
When did Adventure Time become a thing? That was like 15 years ago?
10, 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think around that time when you were getting things like Adventure Time and you started getting things like Steven Universe, you started getting all of those kind of things where they were starting to try and say things with their animated content.
I think it's more that they also handled the storylines in a way that it was fun and silly for kids, but they didn't talk down to kids. And I think that's what any adult who appreciates that as well can like, okay, yes, now I'm not being talked like a child, because while it is aimed at children, I can understand as well, and this is clear and it has deeper meanings to it. I probably would say one of the first, definitely not the only, but just one that comes to mind right now, in speaking of like Weeb adjacent things, would probably be the original Teen Titans. The original Teen Titans, you know, it was very silly and they had their like stylized things and there was just like the main five of them. But they handled a lot of things on that show that other shows did, but they were so ham-fisted about it that you're like, kind of goes over, not goes over your head, but you don't want to hear it. So, you know, back in the days in certain like sitcoms and stuff, they would have the drug episode where it's like, oh my God, I touched a weed, and you have a heart attack, and like,
I touched a weed,
and you're over it.
It's
you
just
know,
a dandelion.
Or they have the racism episode where the kid walks down the wrong street and then gets beat up by 45 different guys. Like, well, yes, racism is bad. Well, also getting beat up in general is bad, but yes, racism is bad.
They're all black and Hispanic, and they're it's the only part of town that has just these people in it. This one alley.
Yeah, it's so
minority alley. Stay out of there.
But in Teen Titans, they had this one episode where I believe it was Starfire, somebody who Starfire had been working with or had something with. I forget what the exact premise was in. This a long time ago, but he calls her Trog. And the person calls like, oh yeah, a little Trog, fine. And you see it upsets her and it bothers her, but they don't really go into more reason why. And then at some point, Cyborg says to Starfire, oh, come on, you little Trog. She's like, no, you can't say that. That's a horrible word. That means that you're like less than. It means that you're not a person. Do you know what it's like to be called something that means that you're less than a person? To Cyborg, who is an African-American character, he's like, yes, I do. I'm a cyborg. And that's the part that I like, that there's obviously the very clear undertone that he, as a black person, understands racism very well, more than probably any other person on that team. But also the fact that he's not just seeing that, he's kind of keeping it on the kids level. Like, well, of course he feels different because he's a cyborg.
Yeah.
You know? So I thought that's just amazing.
But I would imagine a African-American child watching that would also make that connection.
Absolutely.
And then so that it's getting across the message to people who might not make the instant connection, but it's also getting across the message where it's like, we know what you're actually talking about. We understand this on a different level.
Yeah, I definitely think Teen Titans was one of the first ones to kind of handle it like that. And again, kind of going back into anime and things, bringing it back to it, one that definitely stands out to me, aside from like Adventure Time, which isn't specifically, I think that's probably going to be as American as you get in terms of the art style. But Avatar had so many episodes that just to this day, as a person who is significantly older than probably a lot of people listening to this, there are certain episodes of Avatar that I cannot watch without crying, just because they're just so impactful. They're so just they get you right. The pacing, the storyline, the words, the atmosphere, the art, it's just all so beautifully done. And you think, this is a kid show, like were they trying to like destroy children? Like,
that's why people still talk about it to this day, that original series, about the way that it told stories and character arcs. And there's a channel on YouTube that I watch, Hello Future Me, all the time, and he had a running counter on how many times he would reference Avatar when he was talking about storytelling, because he does things on storytelling. And I think that just kind of goes to show just the quality of that show, and basically take everything that M. Night Shyamalan did in his movie and do the opposite of that. And then that is the original Avatar.
And you know, now that I'm thinking about it, to give credit where credit is due, even going back before, like we said, like it was the past 10, 15 years, when I think, but actually it was even more than that, because if you think of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles, and again, these are two shows that was such a very close to my heart.
It was a good period of TV.
There's so many shows of Batman where as a kid, I remember watching like, I am not mentally prepared for this kind of intensity in storytelling. It was just like, I'm feeling things that I don't understand how to process them. And then as an adult, you're like, that was a damn good episode. It was a short kind of snippet. There's one episode of Batman the Animated Series where Robin fights Clayface because he's trying to protect a little girl from Clayface, but doesn't show what the connection is. Whatever, fine. Fast forward, spoiler, because this is again like what, 30 years ago?
90s, yeah.
Exactly. You find the little girl was a kind of like a offshoot of Clayface that he sent out to scout for him. But when she
I'm getting memories of this now that you're talking about it.
She became sentient and didn't want to go back, because if she goes back to Clayface, she'll be reabsorbed and she loses her sense of self. She stops existing. So Robin's trying to help her. Fine. Ultimately, the little girl sacrifices herself to help Robin. They arrest Clayface. When Jim Gordon finds Batman and Robin and says, "What are we booking him on?" And he's like, "Oh, destruction, da da da." And Robin goes, "And murder," and just walks away. There's no happy ending. There's no cheerful. There's no stay in school, kids. They just leave you with that. And it's so rough. And I just remember thinking like, damn guys, it's 4 p.m. Like really? Like I just got home. let me enjoy my childhood a little bit longer.
It's the nature of individuality, things like that. What makes you a person? What makes you a life?
And the thought of kids, as a kid at that time myself, dealing with that kind of grief and having to process it and not being able to do anything with it. So many times I think young people have these things that they don't happens and they don't know what to do with it. And I think they're at least seeing it somewhere. Even like an animated show, it's like, yes, he feels sad the way I felt sad. So
I think these are the standout examples. I think looking at it as a whole, the fact that these examples stand out so much, I think goes to the dichotomy of what was happening at the time, of a lot of how kids content was treated versus how a lot of anime is treated. I feel like it was more the norm to be able to handle issues fairly well in a lot of anime that was coming out for kids, versus in American television we have to dig for examples, but there's really good examples there.
Yeah.
Gargoyles is a really good example. Batman the Animated Series is a really good example, and like the more recent ones that we've come up is a really good example. But there was a lot of schlock.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and that's actually my first introduction to animation cartoons in general, is that cartoon and animation were seen for the longest time as a means to sell another product to children. That's what they were. That's how it was.
Just big commercials.
That's it. Or just a virtual babysitter. Put the kids in front of the TV, let them watch their show, watch their Looney Tunes, their Flintstones, whatever it is back in the day. And then they had these, and I don't know the exact law, but they had a rule or regulation, whatever, saying that they cannot just market to children. Like that can't happen. So what did they do? They put in the moral of the day. They put in this thing that this is why Sailor Moon at the end, to kind of get around some of those things of like the violence and else. They say, oh, and remember when you have a friend, as Sailor Moon does, because that's what you're learning. Now it's an educational show. Now it's a good show. G.I. Joe had the, hey Billy, don't touch live wires. They're like, oh, okay.
The things that have become a meme at this point.
Exactly. You know, even Thundercats that had their episodes where they had like their moral that they wanted to teach kids, make sure kids know, because otherwise they were just very long commercials. And to avoid this, okay, fine, we're going to put a message in there. And as I guess, understood responsibility to youth and people in general, became more aware. They said, okay, you know what, maybe animation isn't a means to just hawk products. Maybe it's not just a means to kind of keep people busy. Maybe we can actually tell a story. And I think that's when the shift started to become.
Yeah, I mean, it came along with this respect that animated content started to get after a while, because I definitely think there was, and still is, a bit of a stigma around animation where it's looked at as less than. And you can see that with things like live action remakes. Live action remakes only exist because the assumption is, well, it was animated, but now we can make it live action. We can make a real thing.
Yeah.
And there's a shift that's happening, and there was a shift that's been happening for, I'd say, about 15, maybe 20 years now, stretching it back, where real creatives are taking animation as a way of expressing art and stories and things like that. You look at the people who made a lot of the really good shows from Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. I look at something like Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls is, yes, it's a kid's show, but it handles a lot of issues. It has a story. He planned out this story before even starting the show, and they ended it after the 3 seasons because that's what he wanted to tell. It wasn't going to just go on forever. It wasn't going to be SpongeBob, where it was going to get 20 some odd seasons, or The Simpsons, where it's just going to run until they don't have paper anymore. This is the story I want to tell, and this is the medium.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of recent things that have come up where I think also the standard that we want our shows to come off has increased. We now expect shows, rightfully so, to be incredibly drawn and have amazing art to it as well. There was another recent show I watched that had an art style that was very similar to Voltron, and I kept thinking, I wonder if the Voltron people did this, and sure enough they did. And it's kind of available to all ages. I think that's what it was, the My Adventures with Superman on HBO Max.
Okay.
Gorgeous art, very anime. I mean, it literally starts with Superman powering up, and you don't get more like American animation than Superman. That's Superman. But to have that little anime flip to him and everything else, an art style,
it is very anime. I'm looking at it right now.
It's gorgeous though, and they're all slightly younger, so it's definitely targeted a bit more to like younger kids. The voices are a little bit higher. They're definitely like in high school and stuff, but the story is still there. Like, you see Superman in certain scenes, he's not just, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, I'm literally trying to figure out myself. I need to know who I am. What am I going to do with these powers? I have these powers. I know it's inherently my nature to be good, but what does that mean? Who am I? He just kind of figured out this past in the show. He figures out, that he's not actual Kent, and that he was found, and there's a ship, and there's these things. And his first introduction to who I believe, because I didn't finish watching it, but who I believe is most likely his father, Jor-El. It's very scary. Have someone talking at you with a certain booming voice, a certain presence, in a language you don't understand, but you know in your heart that you're connected to this person. Like, what does this mean for me? All the while very much just wanting to be a normal person. The first episode starts with, today's gonna be a normal day. He's not looking for superstardom. He's not looking for glory. He wants to be the most normal person that you don't even acknowledge in the whole world. And that's his whole focus. And you see how much he struggles with that. And in those little details of having somebody who is a bit more relatable in that sense of seeing the struggles they go through, as well as having this gorgeous animation, is a good elevation where it's come to back in the day. Back in the day, they just kind of chop stuff up and just have it copy and pasted. There's so many scenes, and Transformers, much as I love Transformers, is very guilty of this, just reusing the same scene over and over again because they couldn't find any more, they couldn't afford any more, whatever the case is. But here, they're distinct, colorful, incredibly drawn, and it's a huge pleasure for me to see that certain American things are getting this quote-unquote anime upgrade, because now you can appreciate the art more while not sacrificing the storyline that goes with it.
Look at something like Invincible, another thing that's airing now. Invincible is a great example of, it's obviously very anime influenced. I mean, it's an adaptation from a comic book, but you could still tell that there's a lot of that Eastern influence when it comes to anime style art and manga art. And kind of pivoting this a little bit, how much do you think this renaissance that we're getting in animated content has to do with the mainstream prevalence and acceptability of comics, because a lot of these things have been handled in comics for a really long time. A lot of these heavy topics and a lot of these things that they wanted to talk about where they didn't talk down to people, because comic books were always viewed as this is for teenagers, this is for kids, things like that. But they would handle a lot of things. They handled drug addiction, they handled racism, they handled all of these complex political and social issues, and that source material was there for 100 years. Superman was what, like 23 or something like that. So it's been there for a long time, and now we're starting to see this, just as comic books are starting to come into the mainstream, we're starting to see this renaissance of a lot of animated content, and I'm wondering if there's any kind of confluence there.
I mean, that's going to be actually a really good point, which is it isn't necessarily a completely new idea to introduce harder things and subject matter into animated media or just drawn media, because comics have been doing it for a while, but comic books for the longest time were pushed aside. Exactly, you said, like, they're for kids. They're just kids things that are fine. They're the funny pages. You just throw them aside and that's it.
You also had all the censorship for as long as they did.
And all the censorship. So they would get into certain things, but then they would drop it quickly, or kind of what we mentioned before, they would use it as the moral episode. Like they had the Demon in a Bottle, the very famous Iron Man storyline where he's battling his alcoholism.
It's the one with Green Arrow. There was one with drug addiction.
I was going to
right?
say that's Roy Harper when he was still Speedy, and he became addicted to, I think it was heroin, and
should have been speed.
So, damn, that was so good. But you know, they have certain things, and comic books, I don't know, I think
you had domestic violence with Hank Pym. The whole art with domestic violence, which became an actual thing. I don't know how necessarily they handled it in the long run, but
I mean, comic books definitely had their moments of very adult subject matter. But I just feel like the way it was being handled wasn't a storyline. Sometimes it felt more like shock value. And that was a part where it's like, okay, you're trying and it's almost there, but it's not completely there. It always felt a little off. Like one of during my major comic book era for myself was they had a storyline called Identity Crisis. And, you know, kind of like they specifically wanted to stay away from like the big three, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and kind of focus on some other heroes and things like that. But the big issue is that the wife of one of their own was raped and murdered. And they wanted to kind of, was just murdered.
You just threw that in there for kicks.
No, it ties into it, trust me. So, and they're like, you know, they're coming after our families, they know who we are, and it comes to like who knows what, and they're like, it's a very big deal. And at the end of the day, the short version is that it ties into some of the more darker skulls in the closet that the Justice League has to kind of protect themselves. And what it was, I think it was, again, this is a long time ago as well, I believe it was that Dr. Light had figured out how to get into the Watchtower. Oh, when he got in, the wife of one of the
Ralph Dibny's wife, is it Sue Dibny?
She became evil, but I don't know if she was the one.
It began with the investigation into the murder of Sue Dibny.
So maybe it was.
I know Ralph Dibny's wife, I'm assuming, right?
No, but so the thing is that Dr. Light ended up basically going there, and because he was crazy Dr. Light, and because before, and this kind of also explains as to why he went the way he went, apparently before he was a much more sadistic, evil character. He got into the Watchtower, he raped one of the people. I don't know if it was Sue Dibny because I don't remember off the top of my head. It might have been. When they caught him, they knew, like he knew who they were, he knew what happened, everything else fine. So they essentially chose to lobotomize him. And in doing so, they wiped his memory of the rape so he wouldn't remember it. They wiped his memory of how he got in, everything else fine. And they basically made him like now a throwaway villain, a silly villain, a D-lister. And
it was her, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So it was like all these things that kind of came up. And when I was younger, when I wasn't a child anymore, I think it was early college year. So maybe 18, 20 around there. I remember reading them like, holy crap, that's intense. Like you usually don't get things in comics like that anymore. And they were going there. They were kind of pushing those envelopes, but the storyline still felt more like shock value than actually pushing a deeper story. And towards the end, I think the storyline did fall apart a little, but that's a discussion for another day.
I feel like there's usually a lot of really good setup, but then the ending kind of lets down a lot of the time. But it seems like there's, just from reading synopsises that I'm skimming through, it looks like there was a lot of wrestling with the morality of
Yeah.
the mind wipe.
Yes. And like, did he have, oh, no, that's right. Was the punishment far worse than what the crime was, since that he doesn't consent to? Like, what's too far? Was it, and now there's going to be people on both sides of it saying, no, he should have gotten worse. And there was like, well, no, we're supposed to uphold morality and good. That's too far for us. We have our limits. And the whole point of the reason why you find later on why they don't include the big three so much in this specific storyline, they do include them, but not as much, is because they felt that they're like the hard voices of the Justice League and they would shut down anything. And I think
there's no moral gray a lot of the time when it comes to Batman,
I think
Superman.
Batman News. See, now I'm trying to remember, and again, it's been a while since I've read.
So through this synopsis, I'm getting a lot of Barry Allen, Wally West, Green Arrow. It seems like those are the ones that were primarily involved. And I don't see them talking a lot about Batman or anybody else. Slipknot's mentioned. Slipknot's the one who died in like 30 seconds in Suicide Squad.
One of my favorite
Ray Palmer, the Atom.
One of my favorite poor Ray, man. He jeez. One of my favorite comic book scenes that I think I've read ever. I don't know, definitely not the best, but one of the best is as I was kind of getting more into comics, this is one of the major songs that had came out, and I was reading it, and there's a scene where Dr. Light now has remembered everything, and he's out for blood. But at the end of the day, he is just Dr. Light. So what does he do? He hires Deathstroke. And coming into this, I had heard of Deathstroke, the Terminator, Slade Wilson, but I didn't really know much about him. And you see him facing off in front of all these superheroes, and I'm like, this guy's a suicide mission. What is he going to do? Like, they go through panel by panel how he takes out every superhero, and it's insane to show that Deathstroke is that calculating and that well informed and that ready, that he probably has his like plan C on how to take them all out. And it gave me an entirely new respect for him, and that's why anytime people do bring in Deathstroke into certain media, I'm like, you guys understand, he's just a guy, and maybe he's like a little stronger, powerful, fine, whatever, depending on the version of the media you're seeing him in, but you don't mess with Deathstroke. There's that scene. He, I think he's fighting, I think it was the Atom or someone else who gets small, and
someone else who gets small.
Well, the thing he explains
those little guys.
he explains his logic as to why he's taking him out that way. So the person gets small as soon as the Atom says the Atom gets small. He goes, "You think
right up Thanos' butt."
Two
birds with one stone.
I still don't know why that became such a big meme, but he goes, you think he's too small to hit. But people forget that light particles are solid. And what he does, he shines a laser. And and then you see the Atom, assuming it's the Atom, being barraged by these tiny little light particles that are hitting him, and knocks him out of being small. He's knocked out. One done. Then you see Zatanna, who is a magical being, can conjure up anything, warp reality in a certain degree or fine, just by speaking the things backwards. He goes, it's a great, powerful sources, but it only happens if she can speak. So he like chops her in the throat and crushes her windpipe. Now she can't speak. And then you have like all these other people, it's like, oh, here comes the Flash, it's fine. So he shoots him in his Achilles tendon, and he's like, now he can't run. And then finally you see Green Lantern's coming down. He's like one of the most powerful weapons in all of the universe, creates things out of your own will, imagination, But that's the part. You have to focus on to imagine it. You can't focus when your hand's broken. And he crushes his hand all the time. It's like, he just falls down. His little Green Lantern suit comes off. And he just took out everybody in a heartbeat. And it's kind of like D&D, where you think D&D, like each round like 6 seconds or 6 seconds, which can take a long time. So that's how I think my first also idea into like that these things that you think happen slowly actually happen very quickly when you're that calculating. So Identity Crisis is just such a huge thing, but
it's just like the argument that everybody makes with Batman. Where it's like, oh, well, if he has prep time, he can beat anybody. And it's basically the same thing.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, because Batman will be the one who not only has the prep time, but he will have had the prep time already years before you even asked him the question. Like, he would have already thought about it. And we can go down the rabbit hole of American comics some other time. But bringing it back to this, exactly, it's the fact that the storylines were getting more intense and getting updated and getting more mature, even though they were set in a medium originally set for children, but allowing them to handle these more intense subject matters where it was murder, rape, drug use, and then fine tuning it where it's not, we have to use the extreme versions. Like we can use lighter versions, but just focus on that story. And, something like Gravity Falls, which is definitely sillier than a lot of things, the subtle way that they handle certain storylines, the subtle way that they kind of portray characters and character development, character growth, like these weren't like, in lots of ways, they were weekly episodes. So you just watch one episode, doesn't really matter, but they did connect. They had an idea there, and that kind of like, you weren't really getting so many episodes individually. You're getting one story that's just broken down. And that's the different thing between some of the stuff that we used to get back in the day and the stuff we get now. As much as I love DuckTales episodes, they were single standing episodes. Nobody cares. That's it. But then you look at even like the current version of DuckTales, these were like overarching,
very different.
Yeah, they come together. And that's what I appreciate, when you kind of get away from that, like, let's do a one-shot thing and then forget everything else later on. Like, no, have an idea that connects everything together so it's a story.
I think there's also a little bit of the people who watched this as kids are now older and making these things, and they're like, these are things that I respected as a child, and this is an art form that brought me a lot of joy, but I have things I want to say. So taking the things that they loved as kids and as young adults and saying the things that they want to say through them. I think there's definitely a reason why that time period is around where it is, because all those people that were watching 80s cartoons and early 90s cartoons are now making things.
Yes.
So I'd like to touch on, we're talking about handling different topics and things like that and how they do them well. I'm going to go to a show that we disagree on.
Oh, man.
And that is Legend of Korra. So Legend of Korra had a large through line of benders and non-benders and the whole thing, and kind of making it a analogy of segregation and all that kind of thing. How do you think that show handled it?
So off the bat, I guess to kind of clarify for everybody who's listening, in case you weren't aware, I am a fan of Legend of Korra. I do enjoy it very much.
I do not like Legend of Korra.
Legend of Korra, for me, there's certain shows I think exactly as you get older, you see them on different levels. As an animated show that was exciting, fun, had a fun storyline, great. Were there certain hiccups? Yes, because I think, again, they're trying to, when you have to kind of push the envelope for something new, you do want to get a little bit bigger, a little more intense, but then sometimes I feel like it's very easy to misstep. And I think for me, the misstep was they started to do too much to Korra. And it's like, guys, let's not put her, like, every hero has to go through their rigorous things, fine, but they were like just straight up like, let's make her almost catatonic in a wheelchair. Let's take away her power. It was like, for me, that felt a little too much. Like they went overboard. In terms of the storyline, I think
it was really primarily season 1 was the whole thing with what's his name with the mask? I can't
Amon.
remember. Amon, yeah.
So with Amon, I think it was something that I had thought of when I watched Avatar, but it was interesting to kind of see that idea presented more clearly, which is, for the longest time, benders were everywhere. Benders were here, were there. They were the ruling governments. There were all these things. They had the Water Tribe, the Air Nomads, the Fire Nation, and the Earth Empire, or the Earth Kingdom. Sorry. So these
there is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Nope. So you had these, like, they're very much part of the culture, and they're part of the government and the hierarchy of things, period. But it was just so spread out that people didn't really say much. When you got to Korra, at some point, and it might have been always there, it just became much more prevalent.
You urbanized it.
But you also now you had quote unquote regular people who didn't have bending power, say, hey, what about me? Which in of itself is not the worst idea to have. I mean, I think that's the same basis of like any comic book villain who says, hey, or Lex Luthor will, to the end of time, will never see himself as a villain. He's like, I see myself as someone who's trying to protect and preserve humanity. You guys have given this kind of godlike worship to this alien being who could raise the government in the blink of an eye, literally, and you guys are okay with that? And
Syndrome, The Incredibles.
Exactly. So, for someone to say, I'm going to stand up to it because I feel like we should have something on our end too to protect ourselves. Unfortunately, that kind of power, that kind of paranoia is very crippling and definitely goes evil very quickly.
Excuse me, Miguel. Don't you know that the way you're going to counteract something like Superman is you have to put together a squad with a guy who looks like a crocodile, a chick with a bat, one who throws a boomerang,
God.
one who goes on fire, and a guy who shoots guns good.
Well,
That's how you're going to counteract that.
if the girl with the bat didn't do it, I don't know what will. But I will not speak ill of Harley Quinn ever. But so with Korra, they had him on, and unfortunately, like it's that thing of like the way that people garner, I think, public attention, and we've seen this ourselves in recent years in politics more than ever. Not to say it's a new thing, it's just more than ever.
Social media now makes it look like it's more than ever. I think we're getting bombarded by it constantly.
It's inciting that fear in people, using that fear to connect them to then bring them to your cause. Same thing with nationalism. They had the Red Scare with communism. They had the Satanic Panic in the 80s. Like, it's always about like, what can we throw out there?
Reefer madness.
Whether it's relevant or an actual thing or not, it's enough that we can use it to, get people together. And in this case, it says, hey, even though the Benders have not been an overwhelming dominating presence on us, they could be. And at this stage now, the things that maybe were seen under the radar before were now not only brought to light, but magnified. So you had the triple threat triads, the people who were like, we're going to be a gang, and there's that because they could. What hope does a person with non-bending powers have against people who can make fire out of nowhere? But then I think the answer was, and that's what was so key to introduce characters like Asami, who was, for all intents and purposes, yes, she was basically in a lot of ways Batman of Korra, but she was rich, she was an inventor, she had money and power and everything else, but she was like, I'm not going to be limited by the fact that I don't have powers. I'm going to go beyond that. And then in Avatar, you had Sokka, same thing, who he had no bending powers, but he was the leader, he was the planner guy, he had the motivation. So I think it kind of helps to kind of bring that back. Like, yes, there are people more quote unquote powerful than you, but you have your own power as well. In Korra, they took that aspect, and I think they definitely put it in such a way that I don't think people thought about before. Like, hey, how do the regular people feel? And in this case, some regular people did feel it, but they never had the voice to express that.
Giving it a anime context and bringing it back to anime is, look at something like My Hero Academia. In My Hero Academia, 80% of the world is all of a sudden superpowers. Like, they all have quirks, and the remaining 20% don't. So there is definitely an avenue that show could take where it shows the experience of that 20%. Like, it must kind of suck to be that 20%.
Absolutely.
I mean, some people's quirks are like, oh, my hand looks like a bird, or like, it's like some of them are stupid, but they don't ever really dive into that. So that's where I can show an anime that actually has an interesting thing that it could be saying, and it doesn't really. But that's also a shonen series, so it's like, if it wasn't a shonen series, maybe it would
have a little more weight to it. I think that's actually a great idea, and I'm sure somebody has made it out there. If not, get on that. But I think about it this way. It's like, generally when you think of like X-Men and the mutants, you have like that one.
I was going to bring up X-Men before you beat me to it.
They have the one mutant who's like hiding his powers because everyone else is normal. He doesn't want to be the odd one out. But it could easily be the other way around, with the added thing of now if everyone else has powers but you don't, not only that are you the different one, but these powers could kill you in a heartbeat. So it's like there's a understandable fear of what could be done should someone take that path. The question is, do you have hope and faith that things won't go their route? Or do you take the path of, well, I just want to make sure that I'm safe too?
I mean, X-Men is a perfect example from another perspective too, is the fact that you have the dichotomy of philosophies in that kind of a world. Yeah. You have the Brotherhood, who feels like their place is to dominate humanity because of what they have. And you have Xavier's school, which is, and the X-Men in general, that are kind of leaning towards, we should protect humanity, like we should take care of them, kind of.
It's interesting that you say the Brotherhood is that because of their powers they want to dominate humanity. That's not the take that I got from it. So I've always seen it as,
so I have my only exposure to X-Men comics is the later stuff, the like after Krakatoa or Krakoa, when they have their own island and Sword of X and all that kind of stuff. So that's later stuff.
So and it could be too. Again, I think everybody's always going to have their own take on things, period. But as a media consumer, I have a tendency to appreciate, the villain, the edgy guy, fine. If I were one person so inclined, I'd have like the poor tortured anime guy on my wall and just like, I can fix him, that kind of idea. But in terms of like the X-Men, I always thought the Brotherhood was interesting, or even just like even like Magneto, because where it could definitely be seen as like, we have this right, this obligation to dominate because of the way we were treated, because we have these powers, we are the next evolution of things. I saw it as there was a divergence where people are being mistreated, disrespected, potentially even murdered because of their powers. And then you have Professor Xavier's like, well, we can't get to that level. We have to kind of communicate and be diplomatic and find the peace and the truce between us and, regular Homo sapien people. And Magneto was like, no, it's not that we're going to necessarily dominate them, but we will never allow ourselves to be scared or feared, or not feared, but scared or be afraid of them, or in such a place where they would have the power to dominate us. And it's like, we're not going to seek out this war, but when it comes to us, we will absolutely win it by any means necessary. And that's why, which I don't necessarily disagree with in the context of Mutants and X-Men, because of the fact that, when it's very nice and happy to live your life, but if someone's coming to specifically attack you, you're in all right to defend yourself. I mean, they say in Firefly, someone tries to kill you, you kill them right back. I mean, that's an extreme example and doesn't apply to everyday life. But in terms of comic books, I never really disagreed with Magneto's philosophies in that sense. I'm like, he's not wrong.
I think that it's because of that dichotomy and that philosophy that you're getting from both sides, where a lot of people thought that Professor X and Magneto were based on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, which is something I've always heard. It's not true, but it's something I've always heard, and you can understand it. They were actually based on Jewish leaders, but you can see the two philosophies there, and that's why there's a camaraderie between the two groups. Even though they have different philosophies, they're trying to get to the same place.
Exactly.
And that's something that I think is expressed very well with Magneto and Xavier versus a lot of other villains where it's the good guy and bad guy.
I'm evil because I'm evil. Yeah, no, he's like, I'm not looking to be evil. I'm looking to make sure that people like myself and people like me and the future of my kind of people have a safe place to do it. And if I have to fight, with blood and tears to get there, then I will do so. In recent years, and I haven't kept up with comics in a while, but in recent years, I have heard that there's been a huge shift, like an insanely huge shift, where Professor X is very much seen like the bad guy. Professor X is actually the
helmet version of him.
I think so. And the reason why I heard is because if you think about it, he's also kind of weaponizing children under the scope of like, we're going to give you a school, learn control powers, but you should probably be militarized a little bit as well. Whereas Magneto,
we're going to throw you in a room and you're going to fight robots and lasers.
That could definitely kill you, but you can defend yourself, right?
You're good, right?
But Magneto, he preaches his message to people, he inspires them, but it's their choice to fight for him. And I think that's the kind of differences, and that's why a lot of people end up betraying the X-Men, because they're kind of pushed along this path, but they may not necessarily believe in it. They're doing it because they're told that they should.
It's indoctrination.
Exactly. But when you have something as an adult, someone tells you something, whether or not it's brainwashing or not, but you believe in it, now it's part of your faith. And as we've always said throughout anything, people are very, very, very happy to die for what they believe in. That's something that you're not going to take from, like, they're going to fight that battle to the end. If you have a child on the X-Men side and you scale them up, they're going to go home. That's it. Like, I'm not paid for this. This is not what I want. I'm a kid. What am I doing? But when you tell them, like, this is how we protect ourselves and our future, I mean, that's a very convincing argument. But, that goes along the lines of more being pacifist or not.
I also think it's done a good job of not doing the shonen anime trope of taking your villain and turning them into a hero, which is really prevalent in a lot of anime. Look at any shonen anime where it's like, oh, well, you started out as the bad guy and we fought you for a season and now you're in our team. Like, they do that, Digimon did it, Dragon Ball Z did it, Naruto did it with every villain, basically.
Well, I do enjoy that a little bit, especially if there's a romantic person involved, because again, it kind of just reaffirms that I can fix him idea, which I
can fix him.
It's great, man. And I think I will say Vegeta stood out in that regard, because you could see how annoyed he was with how his life turned out. He could see how mad he was. Like, really? I was a great
pink shirt Vegeta.
Yeah, I was a great Saiyan Prince. Then fast forward to like GT, which I know people don't like GT, but still I like GT. And he has a mustache, he has his kids, and he's like, what am I doing with my life, man? I was an emperor and a ruler. And what is this shit?
He's got big old stepdad energy
Oh,
from GT.
Man. So then when he decides to go nuts and says, you know what? I will accept baby's power and he will use my anger and resentment and we're going to grow stronger. It makes sense.
You even get it in Z with the Majin.
Yes.
The Majin arc when he takes over.
Did not take much for him to go evil again.
No.
He was ready to go.
But Vegeta's probably one of the best examples of it happening in Shonen because it took a long time. It was gradual. You essentially had from the end of the Saiyan arc through all of Namek and getting like slow transformation through Namek, but he was still an asshole. He was still evil in the Namek saga. And then once we get to the androids and Cell, you start that starts to turn.
Yeah.
And because it was so gradual, I think it wasn't as jarring as, well, we were fighting you last season, but 3 episodes in, you're now a good guy, which is a lot of the time. And in the case of Professor X and Magneto fights with the good guys a fair amount, but he's still himself. He still has his opinion. He still has his philosophy, and he still does things the vast majority of the time the way that he wants to do them. And I think that that's a really good representation of how you can handle these issues and show that there's 2 sides to the issue without automatically defaulting to one.
Yeah, I say this is the one you should take. Like, no, these are the ones that they're one's probably not as quote unquote good as the other, but
you understand it.
Exactly. You understand it and you see that there are some qualities to each side that, you know, make sense. And, you know, again, if we're going by what I think is now, I mean, it probably has been, again, I'm not super versed, so I can't say, but if we're going by the general backstory of Magneto being a child in the concentration camps and stuff, then absolutely, growing up with that kind of a history, that kind of background in your mind, and probably knowing that at one point you were going to be exterminated just because of your religion, what you felt was you're identifying with, you were definitely going to be then exterminated for what's now in your DNA. And he has that one line in one of the movies, which I know it's like a little kind of quirky throwaway line, but I feel like it always hit me hard, is when someone's saying something about, oh, you're going to get ink. He's like, I can guarantee you. He shows off his arm where he has his number, serial number. He goes, ink will never touch my skin again.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of like focus of like, my past has shaped me into who I am today. I'm going to take this as far as I can. And he's a G. You can't knock him. He's a G.
Yeah, Sir Ian McKellen, one of the brightest spots of that movie series. Even once the movies started going down, I'll still take me some Ian McKellen.
Oh man, those X-Men movies, God bless them. So Jeremy, you did give me some homework to do beforehand to kind of get things going, and I want to definitely see if we can touch upon that, which is going to be discussing this week's, or the recent week's, recent anime for the 2024 winter season.
Yes, that is, at time of recording, just getting going. Most of the shows only have 1 episode out, so we're going to give our first impressions on a couple of them. What was the homework that you got done for class?
So what I was asked, and it sounds silly, but I really did enjoy this because it gave me something to kind of start off with, something to kind of jump back in, and it was definitely a variety of things. We had Mr. Villain's Day Off. We had magical girls, gushing over magical girls, something along those lines. And we had
give me the full title of the last one.
You know what it is? To find them, I had to look up the Japanese titles and then look for them that way. So I know it's something gushing magical girls.
No, gushing over magical girls was fine.
Okay,
it's the one you haven't said. What's the full title though?
The 7th time loop, something along the lines of 7th time loop.
7th time loop. The villainess enjoys a carefree life married to her worst enemy.
By Fallout Boy and Tumblr.com.
Yes. There's a decent amount of them this year. There's also the strongest tank, Labyrinthian raids. The tank with the 9,999 resistance skill got kicked from the hero's party. That's the full title. Yeah.
Every time I think these titles can't get longer, they do, and I think it's become its own. I can't imagine its own meme in Japan to kind of say how long can we make this title, because this is insane. And
it seems like they're trying to one up each other. For the most part, it seems like they're light novel adaptations. A lot of them are like that, and they kind of stay away from that when it comes to shonen stuff, because I feel like they know shonen is going to have wide appeal to the mass market. So you don't want Naruto to be called the child with the fox inside of him and talks to everybody and all that kind of thing. You want it to just be Naruto,
Yeah.
Bleach, Dragon Ball Z, like easy for people to understand. But so these were the 3 that you watched this week, first episodes of, and what do you think of them so far?
I think one of them, it's again, it's a very good variety because they're all different. They all should be viewed and critiqued and interpreted differently. But for me personally, there was one that was a very, very high enjoyable or very enjoyed very highly. So I'll definitely be pursuing that one more and definitely want to see where it turns out. There's one that's between medium and very enjoyable for me, which I could watch another one. I could not. I'm okay about it. I didn't hate it, but wasn't super crazy about it. And there's one that I feel like it's not specifically my genre forte, but I'm willing to give it a shot because you had suggested it. So I'm going to try and see where it goes.
So which one falls in which category?
All right. So first, I guess we'll work our way backwards. For the one that's definitely not my genre that caught me off guard the most was the gushing over magical girls. I didn't read any synopsis on these. I didn't read anything else. I knew one of the recommendations that you had suggested was ecchi, but in my experience, the most ecchi anime I watched, I guess, because they're ecchi light. I'm a very big fan of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, which is very suggestive and everything else, but there's nothing out that directly out.
Listen, this is some problematic aspects of Kobayashi's Dragon Maid.
Yes, absolutely. But there's a difference between Lakua kind of smothering the little kid with her breasts while they're sleeping because she doesn't realize, and then something else where, yeah, Gushing Magic Girls went hard. It went hard on this.
Listen, this is podcast safe for kids. We could talk about it. She is really into magical girls in a way that your typical fan is not. She wants to make them experience things.
It depends what fans you're talking to, because it actually may be that a lot of fans see it the same way. So I guess to kind of speak a little more bluntly, basically, we can kind of go into the deeper dive another time, but she's, like you said, a fan of magical girls who sees an opportunity to become a magical girl herself. Things go south, and she's kind of realizing some things about herself and her powers and how they are not your standard magical girl abilities or enjoyment, and she's just gonna roll with it. And the concept, the premise itself wasn't bad by any means. It was definitely different. I appreciate how certain things were like everyone was confused, and then certain things were like, well, that's just what happens. I'm like, that's not what just happens. I've seen magic girls.
That's not what happens.
That's not the standard, guys. But no, everyone's just gonna roll with it. And then but for me, I think the part that I wasn't too sure it was actually just how ecchi it was, because again, I wasn't expecting that. And again, it's not necessarily bad that it's a category and a fan favorite for many people. I just wasn't expecting it. I will probably still see it, just kind of see how it turns out, because this would be officially my first ecchi anime. So I'm curious, but I definitely will be watching this with the blinds down, the door closed, and on headphones, because I did not realize I could not put this on my main TV with my speakers hooked up.
Yeah, this is not a surround sound kind of.
I learned that the hard way. It's not. It's really not.
There's full-on nudity in the show, which I was not expecting, because usually they do that thing where they censor it with like light beams or something.
Light beams here.
Full-on nudity in this. There's bondage. There's BDSM. There's like props being used for spanking and tickling.
I do want to say to anyone listening, this is not by any means any type of like kink shaming or anything. We are very sex positive here. We're very inclusive and open to all people. But one, these are minors, which is very uncomfortable.
Yeah, they're all high school girls.
Yeah. And two, the fact that it's consent's a big thing. This is not about consent at all.
Not in a lot of anime and hentai.
I know.
Not
and
typically a big thing.
You hear that as like a meme and as a joke, but it's when you see it specifically that you're supposed to be watching, it's like, oh, that's not cool. And you just you have to just find out where it ends.
I think there's going to be some potential for some interesting things in the show of exploration of kinks in general. And your acceptance of them within yourself and whether or not you cut yourself off from them because of expectations. I think that's the potential this show has. I don't necessarily know if it's going to go down that route. If it goes down that route, that's great, because there's been transformative magical girl content in the past. Madoka Magica changed the genre when it came out. Everybody tries to chase the dragon that is Madoka Magica transforming magical girls. And there's the potential to do that in this genre. I just don't know if this is going to be etchy schlock for the whole thing, or it's actually going to do character exploration.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that is probably one of the main reasons. I'm sure people are going to hear us and yeah, sure. But that's actually one of the main reasons why I do want to kind of see where it goes, because the idea in of itself of seeing like, hey, I'm going to learn something new about myself and I'm going to be okay with this. And, you know, that's a good thing on its own. So I'm definitely curious, because the main character, as we kind of touched upon in the past, of they're exposed to something different that they know is quote unquote wrong, but they like it. And it's like, is it bad to enjoy this? Is this bad to now? Obviously, best case scenario, it's with a adult,
consenting adult
partner,
yeah.
You know, all those things. But it's ecchi anime night. Like I said, this is my first foray into it, and caught me off guard. But I'm willing to give it the old college try.
So that is your bottom pick. What is your next pick up?
So going up from there, then we had the Seventh Time Loop, which one more time was a whole title.
Seventh Time Loop. The villainess enjoys a carefree life married to her worst enemy.
Which and again, I tried to limit how much I knew going into this. So all I knew was Seventh Time Loop, and then I know that the Japanese name is Seven Loop, and then Japanese.
It's easy to pick out that one.
Exactly, yeah. So I was like, okay, that's all I need to know. I didn't read anything else. From watching it off the bat, this one I think it was a little bit higher than the middle of the ground, just because animation is gorgeous. In the first sequence of, and I'm going to try not to spoil too much, there's a fight sequence, gorgeous animation. Reflections, the light hitting, everything else fine. It's very intense anime. And I thought, oh wow, this is going to be like, maybe not exactly like Berserk, but it's going to be like that kind of level of like intensity and fighting and everything else.
And you're talking about OG Berserk, not 2016 Berserk.
No, yeah. And then there's a sharp left. And you're like, there's more to this. But then as the story progressed, it does kind of pull you in, because you're just kind of filled with so many questions. Like, how did this happen? What's going to happen next? Anything else? The best kind of mini thing I can say to not spoil too much is if you've seen Loki recently on Disney Plus, and that idea of you start over, but you have all of your memories, you have all your things and knowledge to kind of just improve on yourself. It's a similar idea to that. But I definitely think that this was interesting. I think it was very interesting. I think it was a great way to kind of get things going. And I really feel that it's going to be something that's going to be a very good payout. It did have a weird, for me, a little bit of a weird twist at the end. Not weird, but it seemed to get where I had a feeling it was going very quickly. So I'm curious to see what the rest is going to play out as.
You're just saying that because you don't watch a lot of shoujo. Shoujo just tends to be like that.
Well, I didn't have the idea that it was going to be shoujo specifically going into it. Again, I went into it, they're fighting, there's all these things like, oh man, okay, fine. And then we've touched upon this already a few times, that idea of what I feel is going to be, I can fix him. It's like, sure. And I am excited. I'm excited. I'm curious. I definitely want to see how things turn out. And I'm invested.
I think the interesting thing for me is the fact that she's referred to as the villainess in the title. And I'm not sure where that's coming from, unless that's just what she's going to turn into, or...
I mean, it could be the idea of, and again, it's a bit of a spoiler from that came out a long time ago, but, you know, spoiler warning for older video games now. In Braid, you play as what you think is like the hero trying to save the princess, then you find at the end that you're actually the villain, and that the reason why she's running away from her to get it is because she's running away from you. So we go into this thinking, oh, she's like the innocent damsel who's trying to better herself, do these things, and at some point she could actually be the villain. There's the one scene that they kept repeating of listing off her crimes, but we never hear what her crimes are. And at some point, she doesn't want to hear them anymore because she's over it. So I'm still wondering, but what did she do? And even though she's denying it, it's just I was set up, and I think there's moderate confirmation that she was innocent of those crimes. I'm still curious what those crimes were, because I feel like that might play into her reason why she's considered the villainous.
It also could be the villainous from other people's perspective. It might not be an objective perspective of her being the villainous, but how she's framed by the kingdom because the crown prince is framing her that way.
Yeah.
Or if it's actually, does she actually turn into the villainous? And then that's going to be...
It's going to be a fun watch. It's definitely going to be a fun watch. I think, and this kind of goes into, I think, a separate topic for another day. As a enjoyer of all anime, I think it's interesting how a lot of times when they make a attractive female character, a lot of times they do end up looking very similar, which is why it's a bit more dismissible. They made the crown prince in this very handsome. Like, I'm very much
the second prince, the one with the dark hair.
Yes, I got lost into his eyes a few times. Like, oh man, this is a very handsome gentleman right here.
That's shoujo. You have to have pretty guys.
Oh man, gorgeous guy.
Yeah, I think when it comes to romance genres, I talked about this in my me and Elaine's review of the first episode, but shoujo is probably my least favorite romance genre, where it's female protagonist, usually a asshole male character that's very pretty, and then it's that, like,
she can fix him.
Yeah, it's that she can fix him, or like he slowly over time. Normally when I watch something shoujo, I'm watching it because I like the other aspects of it, and I can kind of just deal with it. Like an Apothecary Diaries is a shoujo, but I really like the other aspects of it, and I can just ignore the fact that the eunuch is chasing after her.
Are you familiar with Spice and Wolf?
Elaine's watched it and done a review. It's up on the channel, but I haven't watched
shoujo. I didn't watch all of it. I watched only a little bit.
I don't think so. I don't think Spice and Wolf would be considered shoujo just because the main character is not Wolf, right? Is that her name?
Yeah, I think it is. I watched
main character
a
or
long time. No,
I don't know.
My sense is she's the main character and the guy, but I thought the guy was a little bit of a dick. And that's why, like, so going by what you're telling me, maybe it is. I'll have to look at. We can circle back on that one. That was just a random thought popped in my head.
It is considered a shoujo series.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. Yeah. Spice and Wolf is a charming shoujo series. Apparently,
Morgan's a big fan of shoujo of Spice and Wolf, and I know it's one of those things that people kind of make jokes on because they're saying, yes, what better way to sell an anime than by making it about accounting and economics? And it's like, yes, but it's visually is always very pretty.
I think my definition of shoujo might be a little bit narrower than the actual definition, because shoujo just means, it's just like shonen it's made for girls. Shoujo means girl. So shonen series are made for boys, and so it's like they tend to have a lot of the same tropes. So when I say shoujo, I'm kind of maybe talking more of a specific niche within it.
Just playing to the gender stereotypes, Jeremy.
That's what you guys come here for. So that was your middle of the road.
Yes.
And then your top of the line.
Top of the line this week was absolutely Mr. Villain's Day Off. This was an anime that from that first episode, I'm in 120%. Show me the merch. Show me the OVA. I'm down. Let me know who's going to be the American voice actors. I can watch the dub as well. I am 100% in. I think the premise is great. The art style was great. The humor versus like the serious moments versus the more kind of just like there's definitely more there, we don't know what it is moments, all amazing. I think what spoke to me the most is that for me personally, as an adult male with a regular 9 to 5 that is sometimes a little soul draining, it's very relatable. There is nothing that I feel is more sacred to me than trying to preserve certain things on your day off. And when you can't have those things or something happens to stop you, it is very, very disconcerting. Because like, look, I may not have much else right now. Give me this one thing. It's that scene of Friends where Ross loses his stuff because someone ate his sandwich. Exactly. It's like really like, yeah, but you know what? When you get older and you have this one thing that you're looking forward to out of a whole week that's been crap, give him the damn sandwich. Yes, he went overboard, but I understood it, and this I relate to it, and I'm also envious. The main character, he's very adamant at having that work-life balance, and he has his boundaries and his line. I don't. I work on the weekends. I stay late sometimes. I'll do double shifts. It's work and that's it. And this guy, he says, nope, I have a very important job. I have very important things to do. I have a plan, but this is my day off and you shall not come between me and my day off. And I respect.
Yes, he will not do any of his evil work on his days off, and he will go to any length to protect those days off. And I definitely understand that. I think it means even more coming out of an anime series than it would in an American show, because there's always this overwork culture in a lot of anime. Yeah. And they talk about it in Japan where you're working all the time. Even starting out with like Zom 100 was a big one from last year, where it literally started off showing him going for 3 years at a soul crushing company, and all this garbage piling up in his apartment. He has no life, all this stuff. He's eating ramen because all he's doing is working all the time. Yeah. And I think having that on the opposite side, where they're showing how important it is to have that life part of the work-life balance. Absolutely. And yeah, he's a cool main character. We're getting introduced to a couple of the secondary characters, and there's going to be more characters introduced, I'd imagine, that are going to be secondary characters, at least looking at all the promotional pictures. There's like 6 other people. But I would like to know a little bit more about what the organization does and all that kind of stuff, and we'll see if it becomes a focal point, or if it's just going to be primarily what spills over onto his days off, and that's all we get to know.
I do agree. I think knowing more of his organization would be fun and exciting, but I also can very much appreciate if they never go into that. If they say, that's not the point of this. They're doing evil stuff, evil things are happening, it's out there, it's being done, fine, but we're focusing on this. It's that kind of, as I've gotten older, my taste in anime, and one day we can discuss like what are some of our favorite animes or anything else, fine, but as I've gotten older, my taste in anime has gone to the anime that I can just enjoy. I used to enjoy a lot more edgy, intense things, but now I want the slice of life. I want the silly things. I want the genre of cute girl doing cute things, because it's lighthearted. After a long day of being at work and dealing with people and, personal issues and everything else, to come home to watch something that's very silly, very wholesome, it's self-care, I think, in its purest form. And this anime, I felt, was not only slice of life, because there's just very mundane tasks that he's doing because he has to do them, but there's a line in it that definitely stood out to me, and I think it's one of the main reasons why I enjoyed this particular episode so much. He says you have to always make sure to enjoy your day off to the fullest, something along those lines. He doesn't mean go out and be super crazy productive and start like 300 projects and do this and flop on this and this. No, enjoy it to the fullest, even if that means doing nothing. For him, his day off entitles a certain trip somewhere, which again, I don't want to spoil anything, and just enjoying things at that place, and then coming home, having his meal, and he's done. That's it. And I appreciate that. I appreciate he has his boundaries. I appreciate he's doing the work-life balance. And I appreciate the fact that he says, you know what, this is his form of self-care, and it's important that you do it to the best way to your ability to ensure that you're okay.
And it's a good lesson to teach everybody who's working too much and just working on too many things all at once. You do have to take that time for self-care, and it's very important.
Yeah. Like you said, it's that kind of American culture that is also prevalent in Japanese culture as well. Just like overwork, no days off, keep going,
The hustle culture.
If you're not exhausted, then you're not doing it right. And it's like, no, you should be content. You should be like, I had a good day. There's more we can discuss about like work ethic, because he may be very separated from his job on his days off, but that does not diminish his work ethic when he's working. You see, he's very determined, very proud of his work. Or even there's a character he runs into who's at a convenience store. They refer to as the combini. And she, even though she's just a person at the convenience store, she takes a lot of pride in her job. She feels his anguish when he can't find the ice cream he's looking for. And that's what I think is missing from our culture very much. But yeah, I love this episode. I thought it was great. Love the characters. Love the secondary characters. I definitely want to see how it all kind of just, the culmination of it all.
So you have Mr. Villain that even if you weren't getting homework, you would continue watching the show.
I can't wait for the second episode.
You have Seventh Time Loop, where you're mixed. Maybe you'd pursue it without
I put on the background again to see.
And you have Gushing Over Magical Girls, who you are going to continue because I'm forcing you.
Yeah. I don't want to say force, because I am consenting to this, and again, consent is important, but I will be watching it. I watched Mr. Villains twice. I watched Seventh Time Loop twice to kind of enjoy it and then take some notes, understand it. I watched Gushing Girls once and I did not want to go back to it. Like, that's enough for me. And the same thing, when the next episode comes out, I'll watch one episode, have it to memory, and we can discuss it. Like I said, I think it's good and important for me as well to kind of experience all these avenues of anime, and ecchi is one of them. And you know what? I've never really watched it before, so might as well start now.
We'll start building that backlog for our ecchi episode.
It's gonna be so many boobs.
As the season is very fresh right now, and most are just in first episodes, we will get into more detail on seasonal anime as more episodes come out, and we have a little bit more to talk about on these shows that are airing now. If you want to get a little bit more in-depth discussions in small bites, you can look on the channel and you will see our first impressions, me and Elaine doing our first impressions of the first episodes, sometimes the first and second episodes, depending on when we get to them. Usually 3 to 5 minutes talking about our thoughts after watching the first episodes and whether or not we want to continue watching them or not. Most of them are already up on the channel. Some of them are still coming in the next couple of weeks.
Or if there's any kind of anime that you feel that we could benefit from or should watch that maybe has come out that we didn't mention, please comment below and just let us know. We'll look into it and see.
We'll add it to our list of homework.
Yes, much homework.
I absolutely love where this discussion went. It was kind of an unplanned diatribe, but I feel like you guys got to know a lot about us and how we see these types of media.
Yeah, and you'll definitely get to know us a lot more as time progresses and all of our dark secrets and wonderful victories and achievements as well.
We really just want to make this a place where you guys can come listen to us hang out and talk about some things that we hope you find interesting. This being the inaugural episode, figured you'd get to know us a little bit, and then we'd go into more structured topics in future episodes, but we will definitely not prevent ourselves from going off on tangents because I think that's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I think it kind of works best in terms of like a flow, getting the ideas out, and it's going to be a very fun journey for me to jump back into anime as much as I used to be into it a long time ago, as opposed to just being a fair weather fan who dips my toe once in a blue.
But I definitely think that it's good to have the differing perspective. Somebody who's like waist deep in anime right now versus somebody who used to be really into anime and is kind of getting back into it. And you bring a lot of that perspective from comics and older TV shows and things like that are things that you know a lot about. And that's stuff that I don't know as much about. I know a lot of surface level stuff about comics, but I don't know a lot of the nitty gritty details that you'd be able to bring to the table.
Now, when you say older TV shows, will you just remind me that I'm old again, Jeremy? Because
you're not that much older than me, but you have more recollection of things from like the 80s, like Transformers, and you know, I was just a glimmer in my parents' eye when Transformers was originally running. So
yeah, I was too. I mean, okay, we'll get into the exact dates, but for all intents and purposes, we are both immortal, and we're just now being aware of things.
We are timeless entities.
There you go.
And you will get to spend a lot of time with these timeless entities going forward. If you do like this, please let us know that you like it. Like the video. Comment down below and give us suggestions for things you want to hear us talk about. We are always on the hunt for topics, and we will give our opinions and ramble on about it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to ask for them to comment?
Like, comment, subscribe. That's what all the algorithms and stuff say. So definitely do all those things. Share the video if you can. We want to try and get this out. And, leave some of your best memories of anime or even shows you grew up with that kind of help form who you are, who you feel even have just some kind of anime reference or inspiration. Want to know what you guys are watching, what you guys have watched, what you guys are familiar with, your own points of view, so that when we come back again, there'll be an opportunity for us to kind of engage a bit more with everyone out there.
You heard the man. Do all those things. Like, comment, subscribe, like he said, and ring that bell so you know what's up. And Jeremy and Miguel will catch you in the next one.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.